this week's drive, we see what makes them stick to the road, go from computer concept to road rocket, join some well-heeled learner drivers, and see fortunes change for Germany and Britain. All this and more in this week's Drive. When Ralf Schumacher, his teammate Juan Pablo Montoya, and the other 18 best drivers in the world line up on the grid, they have one overriding thought: how to get in front, how to pass, how to overtake. And once they've done that, the overriding thought becomes, how do I stay in front? The mechanics of it are essentially the same. Set the opponent up, wait for a gap, and go at it, whichever side offers the best chance of success. At Magny-Cours, scene of the forthcoming French Grand Prix, this is especially critical, as there aren't many opportunities to get by the car in front. Almost the only place it can be safely achieved is at the end of the long straight into a tight hairpin bend.
Probably the only way to pass somebody in the hairpin is getting a good run out of the long right-hander. But you normally, when you try to foul them, you normally get a lot of understeer there. So, if you can get a good, draft or toe into the hairpin, you probably can pass them fairly easy. The thing is, actually, if you pass them in the inside, then you're actually just going to be too slow.
Picture a fight between two identical cars on the long straight. The car in front is driving flat out, with the disadvantage of maximum drag, hitting the air at high speed. This gives the benefit of maximum downforce on the front and rear wings, depending upon the angle that the teams decided will give the best balance between grip and drag. The wings are aligned so that the airflow from the front doesn't interfere with the rear. But the leading car leaves the air in a state of turbulence, one reason why rear wings are sometimes called spoilers. And drivers refer to the area behind the leading car as the dirty air. The following car travels underneath most of this confused air in a partial vacuum. So, while the following car doesn't benefit from maximum downforce, it is literally sucked along in the slipstream, as long as it gets in close enough behind the car in front. Critically, the following driver will have a small reserve of power and can dart out of the still air and slip past the car in front, usually as they get close to where the drivers would be hitting the brakes and changing down for the next corner. And being in the slipstream with reduced downforce is a bad thing in a corner. This is where the car will understeer off the road, as Juan Pablo described.
You gotta commit yourself to doing it, and that's it. Sometimes works, sometimes doesn't, and I think you need to be well positioned when you're trying to do it. You need to be 100% committed.
So, with the advent of huge aerodynamic efficiency, drivers have still more to think about, like how their cars will behave if some of that extra grip is lost when behind another driver. Also, the French track offers another little problem for drivers.
The main problem at the track in Magny-Cours is that it's very difficult to see into the corners. You sit very low in a Formula 1 car, and the curve radius there is sometimes a little odd, so it's very difficult to find the apex of the corners. You have to get used to it, especially in the really quick corners that you drive through in 4th or 5th gear.
The circuit is relatively new. Formula 1 races have been held here since 1991. But these deep corners make it relatively unpopular with the drivers. The cars will have their wings set quite steeply for maximum downforce and grip on the flat corners. Montoya and Schumacher will refresh their memories of the track in the team's simulator.
I think Magny-Cours circuit overtaking is very difficult, because as you come out of such a quick corner, turn 2, it's very difficult to follow somebody because the aerodynamics of the car don't work that well when you're too close. So you can lose quite a lot of ground. Unless the car in front doesn't make a mistake, it's nearly impossible.
It's hard to overtake, so the track is relatively unspectacular, and the race might be won in the pit stops. The exception is turn 1 at the end of the start-finish straight, where drivers will try to outwit one another.
At the end of the long straight, there's a really beautiful 180-degree hairpin bend to the right, which absolutely begs the drivers to overtake. There have been lots of overtaking maneuvers there in the past, but there's also been lots of crashes. If the drivers don't happen to agree with each other, then they tend to crash.
How would you like one of these toys at home? Computers analyze data from past races and test sessions and are a major part of race preparation. But when the lights go out, it's all down to the man in the hot seat. Down under to Australia now for the return of a legend. Holden is the Australian arm of General Motors, and they build some unique cars. 30 years ago, they built a muscle car called Monaro, and they've just done it again, putting the nameplate on a thoroughly modern machine. What's interesting about Monaro is that it will travel beyond the wide brown land of Australia and be seen in many other countries, badged as either a Chev Lumina SS or as the new Pontiac GTO. Essentially, Monaro is a two-door version of the Holden Commodore four-door saloon, which is already sold in some countries as a Chev Lumina. But the new coupé is much more than just a four-door with two doors welded up. The original prototype was built by enthusiastic engineers after hours and in their own time, and largely without the knowledge of the company's senior management. The first hand-built version headlined the Holden stand at the 1998 Sydney Motor Show and received huge public support. So the company gave the project the nod, and the rest is history. From then on, the resources of General Motors came into play, with the latest computer-aided design and manufacturing systems used to shorten the process. Unfortunately, the demands of cost-effective mass production and road-going safety requirements meant that some of the prototype's more spectacular features got lost in the conversion from showstopper to streetcar. The final result is big and heavy. It's 4.8 meters long, 1.8 meters wide, and weighs 1,645 kilograms, over 1.5 tons. Just one area where computers can save time is in the testing and verification of new designs. Clever software even lets stylists model how the car's details will look on screen. Compare what the computer saw with the real side impact test. To be acceptable worldwide, the Monaro gets Chev's 225 kilowatt 5.7 litre alloy V8, rather than the 5 litre 180 kilowatt engine that Holden fits into its Commodore. There's a choice of 4-speed auto or 6-speed manual gearbox. So when you next see a Lumina SS or a new Pontiac GTO, think of kangaroos. At some big companies with big reputations for building high-quality cars, there are a few people with very unusual jobs. Some of the Audi noise team, the creaking and cracking crew, ride in the luggage compartment instead of in the cabin and are deliberately taken over bumpy roads and test tracks. It might look like a form of torture or a scene from a gangster movie, but it's all in the name of quality. During the development of a new model, innumerable tests are carried out until the last creaking and cracking noise problems are eliminated. Typically, noise analysis for Audi models takes an entire year. Noise is analysed using human and electronic listeners on roller and shaker test rigs, in climatic chambers, and in wind tunnel tests with microphones shaped like real ears and mounted on dummies. Those who pay top dollar for their luxury cars expect top quality, and manufacturers like Audi guard their brand and their brand promise carefully, aware that even the smallest, almost invisible detail can affect a customer's driving and riding pleasure. Wind noise at high speed can be more than just an irritation. It can become dangerously distracting. Airflow over the car can also affect fuel consumption, engine cooling, and even the road holding and handling too. Interestingly and unusually, Audi conduct airflow tests on full-size prototypes, not models, and on a rolling road. Rollers under each wheel that allow the vehicle to be driven normally, but without going anywhere. This is done to see if the movement of the wheels and tyres have an effect on the flow of air, especially on the underbody. It replicates, as closely as possible, the effects of driving on the road, with variously studded rollers reproducing course surfaces. Audi expects their cars to carry rear seat passengers too, and checks the back of the cabin for noise levels. Meanwhile, the nose team sniffs out trouble by sticking their noses into around 500 various components from the vehicle interior, analysing all the smells the human nose can detect. To replicate high temperatures common in many tropical countries, they heat up components to 80 degrees Celsius to ensure that smells don't arise when car interiors get hot. Smells can come from various plastics, leather, and the adhesives used in the interior for years after the car was built. Audi is a pioneer and a benchmark in odour analysis, the only luxury car manufacturer that employs a nose team on the trail of disagreeable smells. The nose team consists of 5 people, 1 male, 4 female. They can't smoke, wear perfume, or eat spicy food before coming to work because these would all lessen their sense of smell. Large components, such as dashboards, are inspected in a special stainless steel heat chamber. Sampling the smells given off takes place via a hose with a glass mask connected to the chamber. This is so no odours from the air can affect the assessment. Haptics is the science of the tactile sense. There is, however, much more involved than the fact that an Audi is expected to feel good. The work is also about ergonomics and operating logic. Light action controls and how they look, pressing buttons and all the various pulling, pushing, shifting, turning, feeling and touching actions that people perform in cars. The team is involved in the development of a new model at a very early stage, evaluating control surfaces inside and outside the vehicle. The 16-person haptics team come from other departments all over the company. The duties of the specialists are varied to simulate a cross-section of customers. The team works towards a uniform feeling that says convenience and comfort to the driver. In view of the high quality demanded of Audi, everything has to match. The shape of the door handles, the sound of the doors closing, the hand wheel for adjusting the backrests, the indicator lever, or the feel of the gear lever. Yet another team works on electromagnetic compatibility to make sure that radio transmitters, mobile phones, and other external transmitting devices do not interfere with the complex electrical components used in modern vehicles. To conduct these tests, they use a specially designed radiation-proof hall in order to ensure that all the electrical components in the car are immune from outside interference, something that is vital for safety systems such as the ABS or airbags. But Audi don't only build great cars, they also teach their owners how to master their new vehicles. As the global growth in permanent four-wheel drive vehicles penetrates the Asia-Pacific in earnest, Audi is conducting hands-on training sessions to show drivers how to safely get the most out of their cars on roads in the region. A group of expert driving trainers from Europe arrived to conduct a series of courses in various countries. The Quattro Driving Experience program is aimed at the art of driving safely and enjoying high performance responsibly under all sorts of driving conditions. But even though the trainers include world-class rally champions such as Suzanne Kotolinski, the focus is on helping Asian drivers to get the most out of their cars safely, even though they may encounter driving conditions like hot roads made treacherous by sudden tropical downpours, uneven surfaces and unexpected obstacles. Besides Singapore, Suzanne and her colleagues intend bringing the Quattro Driving Experience program to other markets in the region. Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, Korea and Taiwan have all staged such events in recent months, with several more scheduled in Australia and New Zealand later this year. Drivers in the Asia-Pacific are buying Quattro models faster than in other regions. In 2001, for example, sale of Quattro cars in the region increased by nearly 27%, significantly outpacing the growth in Europe and worldwide. And the upward trend has continued. Over 37% of all Audis sold in the Asia-Pacific are Quattros, above the global average of 27%. Audi is the only luxury car manufacturer to offer permanent four-wheel drive across its entire product range. They introduced permanent four-wheel drive 22 years ago, and their Quattro system, originally developed for rally driving, has successfully translated rally success into high-performance, permanent all-wheel drive road cars. However, four-wheel drive is not just an experience, it's a science. And the rise in popularity of permanent four-wheel drive vehicles has spawned a new demand from drivers. Lessons on how to get the best performance out of their vehicles while ensuring the ultimate safety for the car's occupants. Otherwise competent drivers are finding significant benefits from upgrading their skills. During the one-day courses, drivers learn the theory of Quattro, followed by hands-on experience to boost the driver's confidence in handling any situation they may encounter on the roads. Beginning with the correct seating position, the course also teaches drivers how to bring their car back in control during a skid situation, such as might occur on a rainy day, sudden lane change maneuvers, emergency braking and hazard avoidance. Most drivers are familiar with the steering and braking abilities of their vehicle under normal driving conditions, but are perhaps not aware of what the Quattro is capable of under hazardous situations. By experiencing these extremes under the safe supervision of the instructors, drivers learn how to react correctly and safely whenever a situation might occur unexpectedly, while also enjoying a driving performance second to none. KTM rider Joel Schmetz continued his unbeaten winning streak in motocross in 2003 when he won the 650cc class at the Grand Prix of Bulgaria, but the victory was probably his most difficult. The Belgian rider, who started on pole, was in the middle of the pack after mistiming his start. Title contenders Cedric Malot, Javier Garcia and Thierry Baptiste took turns at leading the field in the opening laps. But in the middle stages, Schmetz was charging and he overhauled first Baptiste, then Malot and finally Garcia. Frenchman Baptiste would drop back to fifth, over a minute behind the winner. Garcia finished a lonely third, 47 seconds off Schmetz. Malot celebrated his highest ever Grand Prix finish in second place, 25 seconds down. Schmetz held the lead to the end to keep his perfect season intact. In typical fashion, the KTM rider produced a faultless performance.
Yeah, it was for sure tough. I was lucky today. It was not as bad as it was yesterday because, yeah, it's when you get tired, it's dangerous to lose concentration. But yeah, riding was okay.
5 victories from as many races ensure the KTM rider is 17 points ahead of the Spaniard Garcia. Malot, also from Belgium, is third overall with 98. Andrea Bartolini of Italy and Dutchman Marc de Ruyver were in a race for second place in the 125cc class. Frenchman Michael Machiot kept his title hopes alive with a convincing victory. The Kawasaki rider beat Bartolini by nearly 4 seconds and moved up to 4th place in defence of his title. The title is incredibly close, with Machiot the only rider to have won 2 rounds so far this year. Meanwhile, Schmetz failed to complete the double after finishing second in the 4-stroke MXGP class. He was beaten by countryman Stefan Everts, who remains third in the overall standings behind series leader Michael Pichon of France and Schmetz. The top 3 riders continue to share the podium, but there's still 8 rounds to go. The BMW Boxer Cup, the one-make motorcycle series, seems to be blighted by bad weather. But since this was England, that's hardly surprising. Being a wet race, the choice of tyres was up to the rider. 34 bikes made it to the line, with German Marcus Barth on bike 6 on pole. But for Spaniards Valera and Busquet, The race was over almost before it had started, although Busquet was able to continue. Guest rider, Isle of Man star David Jeffries loves Alton Park and passed American Punish and then Bath to take the lead as the track began to dry. But he had made the wrong tyre choice and moved steadily backwards through the field. Barry Burrell, just 16 years old and too young to ride a bike like this on the street, outbrakes himself and takes to the escape road, promoting bike journalist Gus Scott to 5th place. Scott held the lap record at Alton Park in the 1980s. Returning rain caught out American Jason Perez, riding on intermediate tyres, and he was out of the race. Italian Roberto Panici fought through to lead by 4 seconds, but the changing conditions were making things harder and harder. 19-year-old Englishman Richard Cooper, riding on rain tyres, was hauling in the Italian lap by lap. Cooper was keen to make amends for his early crash in round 1 at Daytona, where Panici was the winner. Using all his local knowledge, Cooper was relentlessly closing in. But the weather changed again. Sunshine was drying the track, changing conditions lap by lap and threatening the riders with glare from the wet surface. These were conditions that best suited those riders with some local knowledge, as the track's grip changed literally lap by lap. Panici's dream car team were counting down the laps to the flag, watching nervously as their rider's lead was steadily eroded by the charging British rider. Cooper had made what would ultimately prove to be the right tyre choice, either by luck or judgment. On the 14th of 16 laps, Panici looks one way as Cooper passes him on the other side, but the Italian wasn't about to give up and he came back at the Englishman. However, his tyres were totally shot, and it was all he could do to finish the race without falling off, holding on to 2nd place with an 8-second gap. This was the decisive moment as Roberto looks back and Richard goes round him on the other side. But Cooper wasn't in the mood to be generous and he crossed the finish line just over 2 seconds ahead. David Jeffries moved back up the field and finished 3rd, 10 seconds off the pace. Sadly, he died a few days later at the Isle of Man. Down in pit lane, British team manager Mark Fisher was ecstatic with his teenage team as Barry Burrell came in 7th, half a minute behind his winning teammate. The unlikely road racers, 1100cc fuel-injected twins with engine cylinders sticking out on each side, are slightly modified to improve their track manners and run as a one-make series by national or dealer-backed teams. No points are scored by guest riders like 3rd place Jeffries, but Panici takes 20 points for 2nd to go with the 25 he scored at Daytona, to lead the title by 16 points from Andy Hoffman, who was 4th in England. The next round is at Le Mans in France. Well, that's all for this week, but so you stay on track and up to speed, make sure you catch next week's Drive.